So the truth about my brother's ground truthing, which is every Sunday afternoon, what are you crazy Californians up to now? That's my ground truthing, okay? So I figured that was the real reason I was here. It's like, let's get some insight. What are they thinking? What's up out there? Truly, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here because we would not be as far as we are in the development of our soil health initiative if it weren't for the partners that we have. And so I'm excited about the action plan that was released about a month and a half ago and hearing some of the reports this morning. And I'm already thinking about, I'm a short-timer. So I only have 18 months left, but sometime in my afterlife, maybe I can be engaged, but I really want to see some of my staff engaged. I'd love to see, I know there's some Californians here, but I'd love to see more Californians here. So I thought what I would do today, because I am a fish out of water, I am not a scientist. I'm an English major. I have a science advisor, because when you're an English major, you should have a science advisor in the state of California. But what I wanted to talk to you about is that I don't need to talk to you about why soil health is important and the multiple benefits that we get by focusing on soil health. I thought I would give a little bit of context to what is going on in California and the reasons that I was thrilled. Originally I wasn't thrilled when the governor's office called and said, we want to talk to you about climate change, because I was afraid it was going to be a new regulation. But why I'm thrilled that agriculture is a part of the strategy, and it was touched on this morning, and I really appreciated Keith's presentation on that. So first, let me back up to my brother, who is one of the kindest, hardest working, stressed out people that I know, because I'm not his only absentee landlord, who's also a relative, which makes farming 10 times harder than it needs to be. And we grew up, my dad was always experimenting with things, and if there'd been more information available on organic farming, I think he would have gone down that pathway, but it wasn't there. So he was always, he was like joined at the hip with our local NRCS office and putting in all kinds of experiments on the land. I grew up with that. So my brother was a very conventional farmer compared to my dad. I think that happens a lot. But my brother, when my dad died right after I bought my piece of the farm, for the last 12 years has been doing everything that is in the NRCS technical guidelines. So I know that former NRCS chiefs are really happy to hear me already mention NRCS about 5 times. And when my brother, who you could cut his veins and he would bleed dirt, talks about the liveliness of his soil and the change that he has seen, going with a big investment to no-till, the wildlife that's coming back. I was telling Jason about the landscape in western Nebraska with trees on the land. I mean, it is so different. And if more of his neighbors would do that, we would no longer see the curtains of dirt that my dad talked about when he was a child in the 30s. It is amazing. And that is the most important thing for us all to stay focused on when we talk about soil health in rooms like this. Is connecting it with our farmers for them to live and see and feel the difference, and to get them to talk to our billions of consumers. And in California, there's only 40 million of them. Our consumers, 40 million consumers who are our neighbors and our voters, to understand and see and feel that excitement. Well, guess what we found in California? People are excited about soil health. I have never had so many new stakeholders come to meetings at the Department of Food and Agriculture as I have seen over the past 2 years to stand this program up. To be able to connect people at a time where they're vitally interested in where their food comes from and how it's being grown and who's growing it is a tremendous opportunity for us. It is also a very frightening opportunity for us, because many are well-intentioned but not well-informed, and sometimes the questions sound like accusations. But this is a connector that we can make with eaters around the world to really make a difference. And that's why I was so pleased that the governor, in updating our climate change strategies, made carbon sequestration through the management practices and land conservation measures on working in natural lands as one of 5 strategies. So in California last year, we passed legislation to update our goals We had the original legislation was to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 20% below 1990 levels by 2020, and we're on a trajectory to accomplish that. And so we now have new legislation that was passed last year to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030, and that's going to be a stretch. And I will tell you, we cannot do it without agriculture, and we cannot do it without really focusing on carbon sequestration and what is happening on our natural and working landscapes. So I believe we have a chance for a new paradigm with our neighbors and our consumers and our voters to really see that this silent minority of people that have so efficiently and effectively delivered them low-cost food, which I'm of the mind it should reflect more of those multiple benefits that we're doing, but that eating is a partnership, and that we can't just put all the burdens of producing the food and what we harvest off the land and the cleaner water that we want and the cleaner air that we want and the wildlife and the biodiversity and all the other environmental benefits that we want and expect that farmer to do it alone. So we have this chance for a new partnership, and that's what I'm starting to see. So our 5 goals for greenhouse gas emission reductions are to increase our renewable electricity portfolio by up to 50% of the total generation, to reduce our dependence on petroleum fuels in the transportation sector by 50%, to double the building efficiency and energy use in our buildings, to double that, to reduce methane reductions by 40%, and to manage our lands and to save farmland to sequester carbon. So agriculture is in the middle of methane and in the middle of carbon sequestration. We have the largest number of dairy cows. Sorry, Vermont, but we do. Is Wisconsin here? Yeah, we still do. We have about 1.8 million dairy cows, and a lot of them are located in a very concentrated area. So we have a lot of nitrogen issues that are being managed through our irrigated ag lands program, and we have methane issues, which I tend to think sometimes get exaggerated, but they're methane issues we can do something about. So last year, when that legislation passed, to meet our goal, they also provided $50 million for us to do dairy digester technology and alternative manure management practices. I'm really pleased that our dairy digester funding just closed 2 weeks ago. We had 36 applications for $75 million, and it only pays less than half of the cost of doing that. And we will be releasing our alternative manure management practices request for proposals next week. And I stress that one because it is very much a part of soil health. And the opportunities for doing that, and I think we're going to have a lot of very creative proposals for doing that. I also want to mention the methane reduction strategy because it's tied to our soil health initiative in another way, and that is for diverting organic matter out of landfills. And we have a goal to establish 100 new compost facilities, and I always add the word well-managed, high-quality compost facilities because all of my farmers complain all the time about the variability and the lack of quality compost. So I'm very hopeful we can get on-farm composting permitted under our strict air regulations. So one of the things we had to do in standing up our soil health initiative was look at agronomic rates for compost, for annual crops, for orchards and vineyards, and for rangeland. And there's been a lot of good work that's been done on that. And so we use our scientific panel for environmental farming to vet all of that very publicly. And they have now established our equivalent to Comment Planner is called Compost Planner that will easily allow a farmer to calculate what the greenhouse gas emission reductions will be by these application rates. So that has gotten done. We've gone through a year process of collecting input from people, and what we ended up doing, because we have to meet very hard metrics from our Air Resources Board on what is a greenhouse gas emission reduction, because that's where the funding comes from in our cap and trade program. We have spent a year going through all of the NRCS technical guidelines and which ones we can calculate to the acceptance of my colleagues at the Air Resources Board. what will actually be under the models, and they've accepted Comet Planner. If you think I'm putting a plug in for Comet Farm and Comet Planner, I am. So, and if the Air Board of California says it's okay, it must be pretty good. So we now have the list of practices that can be used for our program. And in our soil health program, in addition to soil health carbon sequestration in the soil itself, you must have at least one of those practices to qualify for our incentive dollars. But you can also do above ground, whether it's for wind barriers or filter buffer strips or whatever it might be, putting more trees back on the rangeland. You can also qualify for cost share dollars for that. But the real focus here is on how do we increase soil organic matter and store carbon in our soil. Now, when you talk about compost, you can really go down a rabbit hole of life cycle analysis, so we're trying to keep some of those things at bay while all the measurement work gets done, Wayne. I'm putting the pressure on you now, okay? There's a lot of work to be done. We were given $7.5 million last year. It took us 2 years because of politics just to get an investment plan approved by the legislature, and what was $15 million got reduced to $7.5 million. Half of it is for on-farm incentives to cost share with a farmer for practices that they will do, and half of it is going to demonstration projects. And that is important for me because I want to use demonstration projects, A, a way to scale up and get more farmers into the process faster, and B, to collect data to ground truth everything that the models have projected that we're going to do. I already have complicated enough paperwork for farmers to sit down and fill out for the incentive dollars. The last thing I'm going to do is have them do some of the sampling and data collection. So that's why we're doing demonstration projects. We also have money available to us through our Strategic Growth Council to provide technical assistance because it's very important for us in California, where you have 77,000 farms. You have 9 million irrigated acres and 15 million grazing acres and another 5 million other kinds of ag acres. And they can grow 400 different kinds of crops. And you can be 10-acre organic next to a city selling to restaurants, and you can be a 25,000-acre produce grower. That diversity, I want to make sure that our programs are easily accessible to every farmer in California. We have a big percent of our farmers who English is a second language. They're immigrants. And so we have had tremendous success by giving small grants to NGOs, nonprofits, and commodity groups to literally set up technical assistance and spend a day or two with a farmer with computers in the room to actually fill out the application and to go through the calculator tools. When we got funding for our water use efficiency programs that started in drought, but they're funded with our climate investment program, we got fish eyes back at us about calculate your greenhouse gas emission reductions. My brother never thought about that. So just having these calculator tools easily available and easy to use was a first step forward. And now we're really changing the vocabulary in California. We could not do this program without our partnership with NRCS. Oh, I mentioned it again. Former chief, wake up, Bruce, wake up. And I love my state conservationists, and I think we all do. When I look at the partnership that we have there, the leveraging that we're doing with our dollars, how we're trying to fill gaps that maybe they can't prioritize, and vice versa, that's been huge. When I look at the fact that we have great academic institutions, but our strategic advantage is our land-grant university, the University of California, 10 campuses, and Agricultural Natural Resources, which oversees cooperative extension and the ag experiment farms, that has been a huge stimulator of innovation in California. When I look at the natural resources that we have, I can never just say, we've got the soils, and we do, and we've got the ability to move water around when we get it, and we do, and we've got a great climate. But without institutions like this and partnerships, our resource conservation districts, and I would tell you that in California, it has been a tedious and torturous process. The number of NGOs who have robust partnerships on the land with our farmers, environmental defense, sustainable conservation, the Nature Conservancy, Audubon. These are powerful and important partners for us that bring another level of credibility when we go to advocate in the legislature. And those are important partners for us that we couldn't do this without. But I also want the rest of my food chain, and I was really glad to see that you've got General Mills and some others. I see a huge disconnect in our food chain, and I'm also reading articles that the food chain is the next place for more shareholder resolutions demanding to know what you are doing on climate change. So regardless of what governments like mine in California might do, or what we hope to do on voluntary incentive basis for soil health on a federal level, markets are dictating many times beyond what any of our policies do. And we have to be engaged in that with the scientific data, with the measurement tools, and with the practices on the ground. And we have to work with our food chain to have the patience to work with agriculture, which does not respond well to quarterly returns in Wall Street. It just doesn't. And this is my biggest worry. I'm being very candid today, but anybody in the food chain who comes out of consumer packaged goods, please spend time on a farm and look at the multiple decisions that are made by a farmer every day, and look at all that we ask of them every day, and look at how well they do it, and with a partner, how much more they're willing to do. I know the capacity of farmers and ranchers of this country to produce so many goods besides the crop that they harvest, and they don't get recognized for it. But I believe the programs that you are working on, that California is launching, that Maryland is doing, these are the kinds of programs that seem to hit a sweet spot with millennials in our population today that we have to be engaged in, we have to be the drivers of, and we have to make sure that they are truly a partnership with the farmers and ranchers who take great care of this landscape that benefits us all. So I'm happy to answer questions. I didn't get into a lot of the details about exactly what our soil health initiative is, but hopefully I gave you a glimpse of what it is, because if you know anything about NRCS, you already have a pretty good idea about it. Add the compost piece to it, and that's what you've got. But I'm very hopeful. I was doing checks right now. We're trying to extend our cap and trade program by a 2/3 vote, because without it, there will be no funding for the state soil health program, and it's really touch and go right now. So that's why I was busy doing that. I picked a really great time to be gone, but who knew this was going to happen, right, Wayne? And I think the vote's not going to be until Monday. What you are doing is exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. So I want to be your partner, I want CDFA to be your partner, and I want to go home and evangelize to more California organizations to be your partner and to be active participants in your action plan. I congratulate you all for what you're doing. I thank you for your time and attention, and really it was an honor to be here. I'm happy to hang around and answer questions or take some now, but whatever you want, Wayne. I don't know if I talked too long or not enough.
I'm all too often, much like your brother, saying, what are those crazy Californians doing now? I want to compliment you on the integrated approach that you've got. And I think it's a real lesson for this audience as well, in that having an anaerobic digestion strategy and a compost strategy and a soil health that gives the potential for it all to integrate is an incredible opportunity, one that we should take into consideration, because this crowd, we tend to look mostly at soil health from the aspect of cover crops instead of seeing it in a holistic manner. The question I've got now, because I'm very excited about what you're going to have as far as the next round on manure management strategies. You've already got a planner for compost. Are you going to do a manure planner as well, so that we can really help sort through the complex nature of these manure management strategies and then link that to soil health.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And just because of our nitrogen issues, we have a huge nitrate issue in our groundwater, which is what has driven the regulations on dairies for, they're already being regulated on what they can put back onto the land, either in lagoon water or direct manure applications. And a lot of this we think it'll come through in several different forms, but we definitely will be considering that. It's just that it's so regulated right now that it may not be something that we factor into that. And I did forget to mention that next year we're going to add in nitrogen use efficiency into the soil health program because we have an irrigated ag land program where farmers have to do nitrogen budgets. They work with their CCAs, who are another important partner for us. So we are trying to get that so that there's more leverage and we can keep the regulatory piece of this as minimal as possible and keep it in a more holistic kind of way. So I would say check back with me in a year. We're very anxious to see what kinds of proposals we get and how many farmers, because it's so disruptive, are actually potentially going to shift to dry scrape and see those kinds of results. But I'm also excited, and I didn't mention biochar, which was talked about this morning. So California, we have a fertilizer review process at the Department of Food and Agriculture. We also register products for the organic input materials. And biochar was kind of like floating around and everybody wanted it to be their jurisdiction and it was a natural one for us. We now have statutory authority over biochar. We've defined it as a minimum 60% carbon. And we are already funding research to get application rates and to see if biochar is the magic that it sure seems like it might be. So that's another piece that we'll be adding into that. Too much information. I've been in politics too long. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Secretary. Chris Clayton, I'm an ag journalist from the Midwest, and I'm wondering what you see for potential protocols in the cap and trade program for whether it's methane or carbon sequestration, all of the various ag elements you've added. It seems to have been very slow so far with CARB. Do you see that accelerating anytime soon?
Well, I would love to, and I think you should talk to Debbie Reed about that. She's heard me complain about how slow this protocol process is, and my most direct experience has been the rice protocol, which took, well, I know it was years of research, and then just putting that together was forever, and now the economics of it, we don't have rice growers in California that are actually participating, but I know of a lot of folks in the Mississippi Delta that have. It is just by its nature is a slow process. However, part of the discussion on extending cap and trade, the agricultural community, which tried to stay out of climate change completely in the first two iterations of the bill, now are in it for the funding, and they also want more offsets, right when the legislature has reduced offsets from 8% to 6%, but they are also requiring that half of the offsets be in California. So I'm hopeful that those kinds of forces might bring in the staff and we can find accelerated ways of getting the protocols done. Again, I think the measurement work that was talked about right before lunch is going to be a critical piece of this. Wherever we can take what we have and springboard that will be very helpful, but that's also why I want to collect the data to kind of ground truth through our demonstration projects to be able to do that. I would love to speed that process up, but right now I don't have control over it. I don't have control over much. I feel like a farmer in that regard. Is that it? Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. I look forward to your results.